The morning my own bank card got declined at the pharmacy, standing there holding a bag of heart medication I couldn't pay for, I already knew who did it. Not a hacker. Not a scammer calling from overseas. My own children. My son and my daughter had forged my signature on paperwork that handed them control of every account I had. And they did it while smiling at me over Sunday dinner just 2 weeks before. I am 75 years old, and that morning, standing in that pharmacy line with strangers watching my card get rejected 3 times, something in me went cold and still and clear. I want to tell you exactly what they did, and exactly what I did back, because by the end of this story, the people who thought a 75-year-old woman was too old and too soft to fight back learned otherwise the hard way. Before I go any further, I'd love it if you hit that like button and subscribe to my channel, because I share these true stories every week and it means the world to me to know you're out there listening. And I'm always curious, so tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one, and it warms my heart knowing this story is reaching kitchens and living rooms all over the world. Now let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Dorothy, and I spent 49 years married to a good man named Walter before cancer took him from me 6 years ago. Walter was an electrician, careful with money his whole life, and when he passed, he left me comfortable. Not rich, but comfortable. The house was paid off. There was a retirement account, a modest life insurance payout, and enough savings that I never had to worry about a grocery bill or a heating bill for the rest of my life. Walter used to say, "Dorothy, this is for you so you never have to depend on anybody." I didn't understand then how important those words would become. We raised 2 children. My son Kyle is 48 now and my daughter Melissa is 45. I loved them the way every mother loves her children, fiercely and without condition, even when they gave me reasons to question myself. Kyle had always been the one who struggled with money. Good jobs, bad decisions, 3 different business ventures that all folded within 2 years, and a habit of calling me whenever things got tight. Melissa was different on the surface, married to a man who worked in finance, living in a nice house across town, always put together, always saying the right things. But underneath, she had the same hunger Kyle did. She just hid it better. After Walter passed, they both became very attentive. Sunday dinners became a weekly tradition again. Something we hadn't done consistently in years. Kyle would call just to check in. Melissa started stopping by on Wednesdays with groceries I didn't need, insisting she just wanted to see her mother. I was lonely, grieving, and starving for connection, so I welcomed it without asking myself why now. After years of scattered visits and missed birthdays, my children suddenly couldn't get enough of me. Looking back, I can see the seams in what they were doing, but at the time it felt like love. They asked about my health with real concern in their voices. They asked about my finances too, but so gently, so casually, wrapped inside conversations about my well-being, that I never once felt suspicious. "Mom, have you thought about what happens if something happens to you?" Melissa asked one Wednesday, setting a bag of oranges on my counter. "We just want to make sure everything's protected. Lawyers can take advantage of women your age, you know." I remember feeling grateful. Grateful that my children cared enough to think about protecting me. I had no idea I was the one who needed protecting from them. It started small. Kyle mentioned he'd found a family estate attorney who specialized in helping seniors organize their affairs. Someone he said a friend from his old job had used and loved. I agreed to meet with this attorney, a smooth-talking man who I'll call Nathan Reyes, mostly because Kyle seemed so eager and I didn't want to disappoint him. Nathan came to my house, not his office, which should have struck me as odd but didn't. He talked about power of attorney documents, about protecting my assets from unnecessary probate fees, about making things easier for my children when the time came. He used the word when, not if, and I remember it landing strangely in my chest, but grief makes you tired in ways that dull your instincts, and I let it pass. I signed some papers that day. I genuinely believed, that I was signing something limited, something that would only take effect if I became incapacitated. That is what Nathan told me, and that is what my children reassured me of afterward. "It's just a safety net, Mom," Kyle said. "You're still in charge of everything. This is only for emergencies." I trusted them. Why wouldn't I? I had raised them. I had wiped their tears and paid for their educations and shown up to every recital and every graduation. Trust wasn't something I thought I needed to ration with my own children. But the papers I signed were not limited. They were broad, sweeping powers of attorney, immediately effective, giving Kyle and Melissa joint authority over my account starting that day. not in some hypothetical future emergency. And within 3 weeks, they used that authority to walk into my bank, present the documents, and request that all my accounts be restructured under their joint management for Dorothy's protection, citing early signs of memory issues that did not exist. My primary account, my savings, even the small account Walter had set up years ago for my personal spending money, all of it was pulled under their control. The bank, following its own procedures, froze the accounts temporarily to process the changes, which is why my card was declined at the pharmacy that morning. I didn't understand any of it yet. I only understood that I was standing in a checkout line, humiliated, while a young cashier tried 3 times to run a card that should have worked perfectly fine. I called the bank from my car in the parking lot, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The woman on the line, after a long pause and some hesitant throat clearing, told me that my accounts had been placed under a fiduciary restructuring at the request of my authorized representatives, and that I would need to speak with the branch manager directly. Authorized representatives? Those words didn't make sense to me. I hadn't authorized anyone to do anything with my money. I drove straight to the branch. The manager, a composed woman I'll call Ms. Whitfield, sat me down in her office and slid a folder across the desk. Inside were copies of the power of attorney documents, my signature at the bottom of each one, dated from that visit with Nathan Reyes weeks earlier. I stared at my own handwriting and felt the floor tilt beneath me. I had signed something, yes, but not this. Not something that stripped me of control over money my husband had worked his entire life to leave me safely. Mrs. Dorothy, Ms. Whitfield said carefully, "Your son and daughter came in yesterday with these documents and requested the accounts be adjusted. They indicated some concerns about your cognitive state and said this was something the 3 of you had discussed and agreed upon as a family." I sat in that office and felt something I hadn't felt in years, a hot, clarifying anger that burned straight through the fog of grief I'd been living in since Walter died. My children had gone behind my back. They had used a lawyer to manipulate me into signing something broader than I understood, and then they had lied to a bank about my mental state to seize control of my own life. Not because I was declining, not because I needed help, because they wanted my money, and they wanted it while I was still alive to feel every bit of the theft. I want to pause here and ask you again, if you're finding this story compelling, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe, because stories like mine deserve to be heard, and your support helps me keep telling them. And I always love hearing from you, so drop a comment and let me know which city or country you're joining me from tonight. I left that bank shaking but not broken. Something in me had shifted permanently. I thought about Walter, about the man who worked 12-hour days climbing ladders and running wire through walls, so that his wife would never have to beg anyone for anything. I thought about how disgusted he would be watching his own children do this to me. And I decided right there in the parking lot that I was not going to cry about this. I was going to fix it. The first thing I did was call my old friend Eleanor, a retired paralegal who had worked in family law for 30 years before retiring. Eleanor had been Walter's friend first, then mine, and she had a mind sharper than most people half her age. I told her everything, and she listened without interrupting once, which is a rare gift in a friend. When I finished, she said one sentence that steadied me more than anything else could have. "Dorothy, they made a mistake because forged intent and misrepresented incapacity are things a court takes very seriously, and you are nowhere near incapacitated." Eleanor connected me with an elder law attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Judge Callahan's former clerk, someone Eleanor trusted completely. This attorney, once I explained the situation and she reviewed the documents, told me plainly that what my children had done bordered on financial elder abuse, a crime that many states, including mine, take extremely seriously, with real criminal and civil consequences. She also told me something that gave me my first genuine moment of relief since the pharmacy counter. Because the power of attorney had been executed based on a false representation of my mental capacity, and because I was fully capable of demonstrating my own competence, I had every legal right to revoke it immediately and pursue action against anyone who had misused it. We moved quickly. I underwent a full cognitive evaluation with a neuropsychologist, something I actually welcomed, because I wanted undeniable documented proof that my mind was as sharp as it had always been. I passed with results that the doctor said were excellent for any age, let alone 75. That evaluation became one of the most important pieces of evidence in everything that followed. With that documentation in hand, My attorney filed to revoke the power of attorney immediately and notified the bank formally. Ms. Whitfield, to her credit, moved fast once she understood the fuller picture, restoring full and sole control of my accounts back to me within days. But revoking the document was only the beginning. I wanted my children to understand fully and completely what they had done, and I wanted them to face consequences proportional to their betrayal. I invited Kyle and Melissa to dinner, the same Sunday dinner tradition they had used to worm their way back into intimacy with me. I cooked a full meal, roast chicken, the same recipe Walter used to love, and I set the table exactly as I always had. They arrived smiling, completely unaware that anything had changed, because the bank freeze had only lasted a few days and they assumed, incorrectly, that I either hadn't noticed or hadn't understood what had happened. I let them eat. I let them talk about their weeks, their jobs, their children, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't tried to steal from their own mother while she still grieved her husband. Then, once the plates were cleared, I set a folder on the table, the same kind of folder Ms. Whitfield had shown me, except this one contained my attorney's letter, the cognitive evaluation results, and copies of the revoked power of attorney with a formal notice of revocation stamped across the front. I know what you did, I said, and I said it calmly, because I had rehearsed this moment in my head for days and I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I know about Nathan Reyes. I know you told the bank I was losing my mind. I want you to look me in the eyes and tell me why. Melissa went pale immediately. Kyle tried to talk his way through it, tried to frame it as protection, as concern, as something he'd done out of love, but I had heard enough lies from him over the years to recognize the particular cadence of a man scrambling to save himself. I told them both, plainly, that the power of attorney had been revoked, that a formal evaluation now existed proving my full mental competence, and that my attorney had advised me I had grounds to pursue both civil action for the attempted theft and potentially criminal charges for elder financial abuse given the falsified claims about my cognitive state. The room went silent in a way I will never forget. Melissa started crying, not out of remorse, I would learn later, but out of fear of consequences. Kyle got angry, the way people often do when they're caught, trying to flip the blame back onto me, insisting I was making a bigger deal out of this than necessary, that they had only been trying to help. I let him finish. Then I told him something Walter used to say to me whenever I doubted myself. The truth doesn't need you to raise your voice. Just needs you to stay in the room. I stayed in that room, calm and unmoving, until he ran out of things to say. I did not pursue criminal charges, not because they didn't deserve it, but because Eleanor helped me understand that a criminal case, while justified, would consume years of my remaining energy and drag our family name through a public process I wasn't sure I wanted at 75, with however many good years I had left. Instead, my attorney and I structured something else, something I found far more satisfying in the end. I restructured my entire estate plan. Everything Walter and I had built, the house, the retirement accounts, the savings, all of it was placed into a trust with an independent professional trustee, someone with no blood relation to my children whatsoever, someone Kyle and Melissa could not manipulate, pressure, or deceive. The terms were simple and completely within my rights to set. My children would receive nothing directly and immediately. Any inheritance would be distributed only after my death, managed carefully by the trustee, with specific provisions that any beneficiary found to have committed fraud, coercion, or financial abuse against me during my lifetime would be permanently and irrevocably removed as a beneficiary. I had my attorney explain this to both of them in a formal letter, cold and precise, stripped of any emotional appeal, because I wanted them to understand this wasn't rage speaking. This was a woman protecting herself with the same clear-headed determination Walter had once used to protect our family. I also did something Eleanor suggested, something that felt almost poetic given how they'd started this entire scheme. I reported Nathan Reyes to the State Bar Association, providing documentation of how he had drafted and executed power of attorney documents that misrepresented their scope to an elderly client, and how he had done so at the direct request of family members seeking financial control rather than at my own informed request. Whether his license survives that investigation is not something I control, but I know I did what was right by reporting it, and I know other vulnerable people will be protected if his practices are finally examined the way they should be. For months after that dinner, my relationship with Kyle and Melissa was frozen, colder than any bank account had ever been. Melissa reached out a few times, careful testing messages, apologizing in vague terms that never quite named what she had done. Kyle stayed silent longer, which told me more about his character than any apology could have. Eventually, both of them separately asked to meet with me, and I agreed because I am still their mother, and because closing a door completely is different from protecting yourself while leaving the smallest crack of possibility open. Those conversations were not warm reunions. I did not pretend the betrayal hadn't happened, and I made it clear that trust, once broken this severely, does not simply reset because enough time passes or because they finally said the word sorry without qualifiers attached. I told them both the same thing separately in almost identical words. I love you because you are my children, and that love does not disappear. But love and trust are not the same currency, and you spent the second one completely. If you want any of it back, it will be earned slowly, through years of honesty, not through one apology dinner meant to smooth things over before the holidays. It has been a year and a half since that Sunday at the table. My accounts are entirely my own again, protected by structures no one can quietly manipulate behind my back. My mind, thank God, remains as sharp as that neuropsychologist's evaluation proved it to be, and I use that sharpness now to watch every financial document that touches my name with a scrutiny I never thought I would need with my own family. Kyle has slowly and perfectly started rebuilding something resembling honesty with me, though we are nowhere near where we once were. Melissa still struggles with accountability, still occasionally slips into old patterns of framing herself as the victim in a story where she was undeniably the one holding the knife. I love them both. I am simply no longer willing to be foolish about what that love should cost me. If there is one thing I want you to take from my story tonight, it is this: age does not make you weak, and grief does not make you incompetent, no matter what anyone, even your own children, tries to convince you of. The world will sometimes look at a 75-year-old widow and assume she is an easy target, someone who will accept whatever is done to her out of gratitude for the attention, out of fear of being alone, out of simple exhaustion. I am here to tell you that assumption is a mistake, and it was a mistake my own children made about me. I built a life with Walter for 49 years. I raised two human beings from nothing into adulthood. I am not fragile, and neither, I suspect, are many of you watching this tonight, no matter what age you've reached or what betrayal you've survived. If my story moved you even a little, please like this video and subscribe to my channel, because I have many more stories like this one to share. True stories about standing up for yourself no matter how late in life that moment arrives. And please tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because every single time I read where this story has traveled to, it reminds me that none of us are as alone in these experiences as we sometimes feel. Thank you for sitting with me tonight, and I will see you in the next story.